Let's get down into the arm muscles themselves. So we're going to speak about these muscles compartmentalized. So I'll talk about the arm and then the forearm and then the hand. So in the arm, the first three muscles that we encounter at the anterior aspect of the arm are the biceps brachii. Now the biceps brachii is called so because it has two heads. So we've got two heads of the biceps brachii. Really important in flexion of the arm. So think about flexing your muscles, right? Holding up something heavy, bending your forearm at the elbow. That's the action that the biceps helps with. There's also coracobrachialis, which also helps with a similar action. And it's located more internally or medially in the upper extremity. It attaches to the coracoid process. And then brachialis, which is right underneath biceps brachii. So this would be brachialis here, and we would see biceps brachii over brachialis. And again, this also helps with flexion and a little bit of supination, which is basically moving palms up to the sky of the forearm as well. On the posterior aspect of the arm is one important muscle for our purposes. This is called the triceps brachii. Now, as we can see, the triceps has three heads. It has three different parts to this muscle that insert in different regions. Together, it's all called the triceps, and it's going to be an opposing or an antagonistic muscle when compared to the bicep. So the bicep is going to flex the forearm, and the triceps is going to extend or open out the elbow joint, which is extension of the forearm. Okay, the next joint that we encounter is where the humerus articulates with the radius and ulna. This is called the elbow joint. Three bones articulate here, okay? And we'll speak about the three ligaments that help to secure or to keep this joint intact. First is the radial collateral ligament, which is on the lateral side. This is the lateral aspect of the forearm. And this helps to go from the humerus down to the radius. Then there's the ulnar collateral ligament. So again, if we're looking at a medial view, we're going to see this helping to anchor or stabilize the medial aspect. The medial aspect of the elbow joint. And then the annular ligament is this round ligament that wraps around the head of the radius. So it's found here in blue, and we can see it on both of these views, right, from a lateral view or a medial view. And it's basically helping to secure the head of the radius, but also giving a little bit of flexibility for rotation. So the head of the radius can rotate quite nicely within this annular ligament, and that helps to secure the joint without limiting or losing flexibility or rotation. All right, so now we move down into the forearm muscles, okay? And I'll speak about the forearm, both anterior and posterior muscles, and I'll speak about the depth that can be found here. So there's a certain depth that is appreciated where we have some muscles that are more superficial than others and some muscles that are a bit deeper in the forearm. So I'll be pointing that out as well. Just because we don't have a cadaver where I can actually point out the depth, we're gonna have to just express that vocally. All right, so we start off with the brachioradialis, and the brachioradialis is this sort of strap muscle. It's located on the lateral aspect of the forearm here. Okay, so this is basically the posterior forearm, right? This is pretty much what we call the back of the arm or the back of the hand. And then we can see on the lateral aspect here, so this is medial, this is lateral, this is the brachioradialis. This is involved in supination. It's usually found or seen easily on the anterior side, but because of its function, it is considered a posterior or an extensor. Next to that is the extensor carpi radialis muscles. There are two of these muscles. One is the longus, right? So this was brachioradialis. This is the extensor carpi radialis longus. Deep to that is the extensor carpi radialis brevis. So we'll see that that's a common theme along the muscles of the upper limb, and then eventually we see this in the lower limb as well. That the longest is going to be the long version of a muscle, and brevis, which means short, is going to be the shorter version of that very same muscle. So extensor carpi radialis longus and brevis. Now these help to extend the wrist as well as give a little bit of radial deviation, moving the wrist towards the radial side. We've also got the extensor digitorum. So this is what extends most of the digits. And then the extensor digiti minimi, which extends just the smallest digit, the little finger. And then finally, we've got the extensor carpi ulnaris, which helps to extend and give a little bit of ulnar deviation. So extension and shifting the wrist towards the ulnar or the medial side. So I'll go over those one more time. We got brachioradialis, extensor carpi radialis longus, and brevis, extensor digitorum, extensor digiti minimi, just to the little finger, and then extensor carpi ulnaris. Now, if we go deep to those muscles, so we strip those muscles away and we look at the deeper muscles of the posterior forearm, we've got the supinator. Now, the supinator runs across, and obviously it's going to help with supination. And remember, I talked about supination as being moving the palms up towards the sky. Next to that, we've got abductor pollicis longus, which helps to abduct the thumb. So the word pollicis is really referring to the thumb. We've got extensor pollicis brevis. This has two versions as well. So extensor pollicis brevis and longus. And this is the longer version of that muscle. This is the shorter version. And both of these muscles have to extend the thumb. And then finally, we've got extensor indicis, which is this deepest muscle here. That's going specifically to the index finger or to the second digit, the second finger, and that is going to help extending the index finger. So think about pointing at something or pointing at someone. All right, when we flip over to the anterior surface, we've got most of the flexors here, right? We talked about extension being a function of opening up the joint, and so it's going to be muscles on the back of the upper limb. Flexion being a function of closing the joint, and so that's going to be a function of the muscles on the anterior side, okay? We start off with pronator teres. Pronator teres is, again, this muscle that's running across, very similar to supinator, but it's going to be doing the opposite action here. It's going to be doing pronation. And we talked about pronation being rotating the palm, rotating the forearm so that the palm goes down to the floor. We've got flexor carpi radialis here, which is this large muscle in the middle. This is flexing, but giving a little bit of radial deviation. We've got palmaris longus, which is a very tiny muscle located next to that. This is usually mostly tendon, and it is actually often not found in the population. So it's absent in about 14% of the population. And it's that prominent tendon that you see along the middle of your wrist if you try to claw your fingers or claw your hand. Then there's flexor carpi ulnaris, which is next to that, right? Going from medial to lateral here. That's the third muscle out. This is going to give us flexion of the wrist, but also a little bit of ulnar deviation. So moving towards the ulnar side, which is the medial side, this side. And then finally, on the superficial layer of the anterior forearm, we've got flexor digitorum superficialis. And this is a muscle that helps to flex the digits, okay? It's gonna help to flex the digits, and these are the distalmost parts of the fingers, pretty much the phalanges, all right? I also want to point out in this view that this large muscle here is brachioradialis. So this is that muscle that we talked about on the previous slide as being really visible on the anterior, but a part of the posterior muscles, right? Brachioradialis. If we go a little bit deeper here with the anterior muscles, we look at flexor carpi ulnaris. So this is one that we just kind of alluded to on the previous slide. This is going to be flexing the forearm with ulnar deviation. And then flexor digitorum superficialis, which I pointed out on the previous slide as well, but this is a much clearer view of those muscles as we stripped away some of those superficial layers. If we go even deeper into the forearm, we've got three muscles found here. There's flexor, digitorum, profundus. So the deepest version so this is superficialis, and if we go deeper to that, here's profundus, and the word profundus actually means deep. And this is also helping to flex the distal-most digits, right? Think about the very distal phalanges. And then we've got flexor pollicis longus, which helps to flex the thumb only. Remember I said pollicis is referring to the thumb. So this helps to flex the thumb or bring the thumb closer to the hand. And then finally, we have pronator quadratus. So we talked about pronator teres, which was one of our pronators that is in the proximal part of the arm. You can see a little bit of it here. And then pronator quadratus is a larger muscle, which is also running across because of its action, which is to pronate, but it's going to be found in the distal forearm. All right, so both of these pronators help with pronating the forearm. Again, that is the action of rotating the forearm so that the palms face the floor.